Hi guys, my name is Alyssa Trahan and welcome back to my channel. So every once in a while, like on Instagram and a story, I'll like bring up, you know how you can find your children in your chart? And then I'll go on to something about my kids and then I get like 100 messages like, how do you find your child in your chart? And I'm like, oh, I forget. I'm like the astrologer teacher and I've never made like a video on this before, so I apologize. I am going to tell you how to find your child, your future children, in your chart. All of them. So let's get this show on the road. First, I have a chart. I drew it out. I traced a plate, so it's very, very concise and beautiful. You need to know the exact time and place and date of your birth. If you don't know that, you won't be able to predict your children. The reason why is because you need to find your fifth house cusp. So you need your rising sign up here so that this fifth house, you know what sign opens it up right here. This is the Lord or the ruler of your fifth house, is whatever sign and planet is right there. So, or the planetary ruler of the sign. So if you have, like the natural ruler is Leo, okay? But say you have any sign there, like you got Virgo there. That Virgo is going to tell you all about your children. You are going to have very detail-oriented children. You are going to have probably a little bit of clean freaks, maybe a little OCD. They're actually probably going to be messy too, because Virgos are like messy and neat. It's like an insane Virgo trait, but you guys know all about that, right? Virgos. You'll be analytical, logical. It's ruled by Mercury. So you have all of these ideas of who your children and what they're going to be. Now, this represents all of your children, but it mostly represents your first one, because the next children actually go around your chart because they're going to have different personalities and they're going to pick up different traits, okay? So your first child is also going to be that child who changes your life in a way that you never realized, because this is also the house of like love and romance. And when they're going to bring out this love and pride, it's ruled by Leo. So there's going to be this new pride you've never had for anything ever. And this is the same for men and women. I know I'm going to get that asked. Men and women, you can find it in both their charts. And so sometimes you can see, if you have a good astrologer looking at it, like, are you capable of having children together, because your compatibility in this fifth house, is this going to create the first child for you? Or like in the case of me and my husband, his first child was not my first child. He had a child before he met me. And so his first child with me was his seventh house. But his first child, it was his fifth house. My first child with him was the fifth house. Okay? So you can see all of that. It's not coincidental, all of it happened. So whatever's in the fifth house is your first child and the rest of your children, because you will have a certain pride in all of them, but there's something about your first. Now, random, small animals are in your sixth house. And so it's funny because if you are a dog mom or cat mom, you will feel like these are your children. And everyone does. But the truth is that your first child is in your fifth house. So as soon as you have a child, you realize how quickly you're able to be like, oh yeah, my dog is not my child. They're kind of my child, like my fur baby, but it's not the same. And it's because the pride that you have in your child and your own flesh and blood trumps the sixth house energy of your daily life and your routine. You want those things around you. You desire them. They nurture you. They make your day better. Animals do. Like, animals are a gift from freaking God and nature and everything. Animals are there for us and they're beautiful and we don't deserve them. Absolutely. But the fifth house always pulls in because it's the house of this pride and love that you have for something that you never knew you could have. So I'm going to explain that. I just feel like that's something to tell you, because it's like your animals are never in the fifth house, even if they feel like it. It reminds me of 10 Things I Hate About You. If you've ever seen that movie, when what's her face? She's talking about how, you see, there's a difference between like and love. I like my Skechers, but I love my Prada backpack. And Gabrielle Union's like, well, I love my Skechers. And she's like, well, that's because you don't have a Prada backpack. And I'm just saying that. And people who are like animal owners, you're gonna be like, what the F, Alyssa, you're so rude. But that's exactly what it is. And for anyone who's had a child, That's what happens. And I want to tell you that because there's so much fifth house energy in your first child that this is why this sticks with it, and it comes out of you and it becomes your child. And that's why you can predict your first child in your own chart, because it's there, because it's born of you. It's a little piece of you. And that's the connection becomes so strong to that child. Okay. Your second child is, I mentioned this in a little while ago, the seventh house. Your second child is in the seventh house. You still have this Virgo energy if that's what's there. But then your seventh house is your spousal house. This is your relationship. This is who you marry. And so your second child will always have a personality in some way that is most similar to the other parent. Okay? And since this is funny, because like I said, my husband's first child with me is the seventh house, but it was my fifth house. My son has a personality more like me, okay? But my daughter has a personality more like my husband. And this is always the case. Now, the second child has more of a chance to be neglected by their mother for this reason. If they do not like their spouse that much, they might have issues projecting problems onto that child, because seventh house is also the house of projection and mirroring. And so if this kid, your second child, you have to pay a little bit more attention to them than you normally would. And you also have to be willing to work on yourself in this case, because they're going to pull out all of that. So a lot of second children feel that maybe their mother was more, or their father was more harsh on them. They had more issues growing up with them. So it's a little bit light when it goes here. So that is your seventh house, is your second child is in your seventh house. And this does tell you the issues. But say it's like, say, if I already said this was Virgo, Libra, it's Scorpio here. So they'll also have a lot of Scorpio vibes. Maybe a Scorpio moon could be common, Scorpio sun, Scorpio rising. Those could all exist in here, just like your first child might be all super Virgo. Okay. Doesn't necessarily mean their sun will be there, but it means that there's going to be a strong energy surrounding the sign that's in there. Now, your third child is the ninth house cusp. So here, if this is Scorpio that we have ruling this fake chart, then Sagittarius, Capricorn would be the ninth house. Now, you think of your third child being in the ninth house, which is naturally ruled by Jupiter. That means there's an optimism to the third child. Usually, in at least Western culture, the third child is the last child. People tend to have three. And it's always the baby. So if the third child's a baby, it's because this baby just brings you so much luck and joy and optimism. Not as much of that pride that you get with the first one. Like, this was I did this. It's more of a, I'm so happy that I got to do this and I get to finally, like, I have this little gift that brings, like, me to a higher octave, and feels more enlightened because I have my third child. Now, I don't know what it's like to have a third child. Never had one. Now, if we're looking, but that's what would happen here. And if it was Capricorn ruling, it'd be a lot of Capricorn energy. Now, the fourth child is the 11th house. Now, this child is definitely, even if it's the youngest child, having that 11th house can mean that it might have been born in a community. So what that means is that the other siblings probably raised it a little bit because they're older at this point and they can help raise the youngest. It also means that the mother has more of a disconnection to the fourth, even in a way that they could become friends, because Aquarius is also like this community, it's acquaintances. So a lot of times mothers are kind of good friends instead of mothers to their fourth child, because they have that relationship and they can enjoy it and really like it and have a good time with it, but it can also bring some resentment. Now, I mean, I'm just giving you like ideas of this sort of thing. So then your fifth child is on your ascendant, okay? This child, your fifth child, is the most like you, okay? So if your second child is the most like your spouse, even the most like your shadow, kind of the things that you're not as happy with yourself about, your fifth child is the one who's like, oh yeah, This one's like me. I like this. Like, I'm kind of into it. Because our first house is where we're a little selfish. But it can also be like, that means that that fifth child is a little bit more selfish themselves. Because even though it's not like the fourth one might have been raised by the other siblings, but yet the fifth one wasn't, it's not that. It's that maybe the fifth one doesn't even care who they were raised by. It's just because they're more independent and isolated and alone, left to their own devices a little bit more, and they kind of get this solo independent streak that the mother or the father relates to more. And so whatever your ascendant sign is going to be really imprinted on that fifth child. So if I had a fifth child, if a Pisces ascendant, that child would probably be very Neptune. And if you think about that, that makes sense. As my fifth child, something that I understand, I'm like, oh, yeah, you're like super out there. Look at you always talking about like beliefs and astrology and spirituality, like just like me. You're like, you're so cool like me, you know? I just can't have a fifth child. I can't have a third child, guys, okay? So don't ask. Then your seventh child, we're going for this, is in your third house right here. So your third house cusp, whatever sign is there. So your seventh child, and that's the house of actually siblings. So that's another thing where it's like probably doesn't know you that well at all. Okay, if you have 7 children, that seventh child is not really there. They're also more mental, and they represent more of your mind and even your intelligence. And they could even be sort of, they're disconnected almost from their rootedness because Gemini is air. So it's funny because there are 3 fire houses and 3 air houses that rule over your children. Okay, so you have the 5th house, the 9th house, and the 1st house, your children. That's your 1st, your 3rd, and your 5th child are all fire houses. And so these are, so they're fire houses, but they're like fiery children to you. They have a connection to you in a desiring way, in an exciting way, in a passionate way you have for them. But your 2nd child, your 3rd child, and your 7th child, they're air. So there's actually almost a shallow disconnect to them sometimes, but more of a like mutual respect and an understanding when you can get there, and like almost a mental connection as opposed to a desiring connection. Now I'm gonna say this because I'm kind of was like, the 2nd child gets kind of shit on, and I want you to know I am the 2nd child, and that's not coming from a place of resentment. It's coming from a place of knowledge and study. I can tell you a little bit just so you can see, and I think that most mothers will relate, and for anybody who will one day wonder what their kids are going to be like they are a part of you, okay? And me and my daughter, she's my 2nd child, we get along very well. We understand each other very well, and we speak to each other. And she was a quick talker. She spoke right away, and her first word was mama because she wanted to communicate with me. It's a very air type thing, and I have, it's funny because I have Virgo on my descendant. So this is where I'm going to get into planets. But I have a Libra intercepted, and I have my Mercury and my Sun sign in the 7th house as well. I don't have any planets in my 5th house, but my Mercury is my communication. My Sun is like who I am, the essence of me and my soul. And then I have this Virgo. So my daughter doesn't actually have a lot of Virgo in her chart natally. She's actually super Cancer and Leo, just like because she still comes from my 5th house, which is Cancer, okay? So she's very Cancer. So she still stems from that 5th house. You can't ever forget there is that part there. But a lot of her ability to communicate and to connect to me come into those planets that are there. Also, you have, what is that called? She's a Libra rising, and I'm a Libra. So all of that there, she feels like sort of imprinted on by me. And I've always made a sort of effort to make sure I connected to her, even when she didn't really feel like she was connecting to me. And that was important to me because I already knew this stuff. And so it is like knowledge is power, and it helps you take care of your children a little bit more. So just know that like if you have children and you didn't know this, it's okay. You know, you work from what you do know, but don't feel like I'm calling you out or triggering you or anything like that. These are just natural things. We are natural humans. We do stuff, and we do stuff. We just do stuff the way that we do things. It's the way that it is. It's funny because my 5th house is Cancer, and my son, my child, my boy, he is a Leo, but he's so Cancer. Like my kids are like both so Cancer, and they do have a lot of this Leo energy. But Leo does fall a lot in my 5th house as well. So even though Cancer rules my 5th house, Leo is there. So there's a lot of energies at play. So I think what this video ended up being more about was to tell you the energy that your children are going to naturally be affected with, more so than who they are. But now that you have all this information, I think you can be able to look at these houses and be like, oh my gosh, yes, my children all are from the 5th house, but especially my first one. My second is in my 7th house, like my partner. My 3rd is coming from this 9th house, or they will. And you can pretty much predict what you're going to have based on the signs that fall here. I did always know I was going to have a Cancer or a Leo, and I have a Cancer and a Leo. And I mean, it's pretty fascinating when you really look at it. So I mean, that's like the chart again. Obviously, if you have the 7th house, and I said that comes in the 7th child, sorry, comes in the 3rd house. If you have an 8th child, it's back in the 5th, okay? So the 8th child is a lot like the 1st child. And now, I don't know, I have met people who have 8 children. My dad is one of 8 children. So I've seen it, okay? My mom is one of 6 children. Like, not half kids, you know, just like full families, because they come from big families. I am one of 6 kids, but there were only 4 of us, and I have 2 younger adopted children. I mean, that they're not mine. My parents adopted after we had already kind of grown up. And adopted children actually fall in the 11th house, and so do stepchildren. So that's informative, right? So here you go. That's where they are. So they kind of bring in this actual alien energy, just like your 4th child brings in, which is interesting. You know, my sister is the 4th child, and she has an Aquarius rising, and the 11th is naturally ruled by Aquarius. So I like, there's so much connection to even just the houses in general and what energy you're gonna have, even if you don't know someone's birth chart. You just know, like, these are birth order issues, and they're already in your chart. Anyway, this ended up being a longer video than I thought it was going to be, but I just wanted to get you all that information so you have it. You can do with it as you will. Feel free to look at your charts and figure out what kind of children you have, or look at your children's chart and see where they fall in yours and how it's fated. It's all destiny. It was just destined to happen. Anyway, that is all, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.